Introduce myself again for the few who weren't here already. I'm Larry O'Hanlon. I'm the social media coordinator for AGU, and I'm a longtime science writer, and I also oversee the blogosphere, the AGU blogosphere. And for this is the second of the two. This is the 201. There was 101 and 201 for blogging, science blogging, and social media. So in this one, we hope to go a little more in depth and deal with more issues that people see. And if you're here for the first one, you know, it's a little more basic level questions and stuff we're trying to get into. The reason we have done this is in past, that's always been the challenge I found with this forum, is we have a real variety of experience in here, and it's hard to address those different levels in one session. So that's why we split it up this way. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll try and do it differently next year. So we're always open to your suggestions to it and what works for you and what doesn't. So please let us know. With us in this half is Miriam Kramer, who is with Mashable, as well as David Petley, who is the blogger for the Landslide blog on the AGU blogosphere. Let me get that in front of you so you know what that one is. The Landslide blog is one of our most high traffic blogs. It's and he's been blogging for a long time about landslides. And if you were here earlier, you might see Maury Pelto, who does the From a Glacier's Perspective, kind of modeled his blog after Dave's blog, and now they're both on the same blog, in the same blogging community with us. So before we start going any further, let me ask, so how many here are bloggers, actually do blog? Okay, how many are very active in social media? Okay, I'm just trying to, the reason I'm asking is I want to make sure we're tailoring it to you, we're going after the things you want to go after here. Something we left off on in the last session, that was, we kind of dipped into a little bit, and what I'd like to get into more after they give some introductions about what they do is commenting and stuff, and dealing with negative stuff in social media and comments and blogs. But before I do that, Miriam, would you explain what you do?
Yeah. So I'm the space reporter for Mashable. So I'm the only space reporter, so if you read space stuff on our website, it's usually me. I also tweet, I guess. And before I was at Mashable, I was a news writer for space.com. So I've been in the space game for close to 4 years now, 3 or 4 years. I write news stories every day, wrote about the Elon Musk talk, and was doing an interview in the poster hall before I ran up here to come do this. So AGU is busy. Yeah.
Go ahead, and you did.
Okay, so I'm a faculty member of staff. I have a chair at UEA, University of East Anglia, but actually my major role is I'm Pro Vice Chancellor. That is, in the US system, the equivalent of Vice President. And my portfolio in the university is research and enterprise. And UEA is probably best known for the fact that it's a very big environmental science university, although it's a broad university in itself. And some of you may know UEA because it was the university that suffered the ClimateGate incident of 6 or 7 years ago. So my portfolio includes all research and enterprise across the university, including the kind of environmental science part. So I mean, in a way, I guess I come to this sort of discussion from two perspectives. One is someone who actively blogs about research and issues around the area in which I work. But of course, I also look after the research social media policy for the institution of which I look after. So I see both elements of this quite a lot.
Quick question for you, Dave, is you changed positions about a year ago or a year and a half ago, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
You moved universities. How much did your blogging and social media work influence the kind of job you now do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I started blogging 8 years ago, almost to the day. Actually, the first blog post I ever put up was on Blogger, not on WordPress actually, but was at a AGU meeting. So I think it's 8 years now since I started. I started my blog as an experiment to sit alongside my research, and I do feel it's become a major part of my I suppose my academic persona, who I am and what I am as an academic, is to a certain degree defined by my blog. But as in the 8 years that I've had the blog, I've moved from being a research-dominated faculty member into I suppose, a university manager or leader. And I do think that the blog and the kind of interaction with the way that research as a discipline in itself functions has been influenced heavily by my experience of blogging. So I think in terms of the development of my career, both within my research, but also as I've moved into a leadership role, it has been a kind of key part of that in a way that I wouldn't have expected when I started the blog.
Again, like the previous session, if there are questions, try at any time, raise your hand and let me know, because we don't have a set agenda the way we want to do this. We want to kind of go after things that people want to talk about here, and we already have one, so go right ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Molly Brown. I work at University of Maryland, and I was recently a civil servant for most of my career, and one of the reasons why I moved to the University of Maryland is for this very reason, is to be far more flexible about how I communicate. And, frankly, I'm so glad to hear what you just said, because that is why I would like to blog. Not that I have actually done it yet. My aspirations are do so because I think that it's all about the question, right? What is the question your research is addressing? And I have been all about the answer. And if I know the answer, I probably am not asking the right question. And so that is really what I wanted to have you both talk about, is how do you figure out what the question is that you're trying to answer, that it isn't the tail wagging the dog, but your blog is about getting to the question that is really the thing that should be at the center of your research, as opposed to the science process, next paper, which isn't really about the question, it's about your resume. If you see what I'm saying. So do you agree with that point, that it's about the question? I don't know.
Yeah, I do. I suppose I'd make two observations about the time in which I've been blogging in relation to your point. The first is when I started my blog, which was in the kind of fairly early days of blogging as a kind of scientific activity, the institution in which I was based at that time told me I absolutely should not be doing it. I mean, they were completely clear about this, that this was not an activity that was valued. And the fact that I put time into writing blog posts rather than writing, what in the UK is called 4-star papers, internationally relevant, world-leading, changing the discipline type papers, this was being seen as being a really negative activity. And I do think there's been an enormous shift in the perspective of institutions now, in which, certainly within my university, we would actively encourage people to do this now as part of their career development. I think it's a really good thing. And that is the second element, which is, I mean, to be quite honest, when I started my blog, it was an experiment. I saw there were a few people out in the kind of climate science community who were doing it, and I thought this is really interesting, and really not many people were blogging in the natural hazards world, and I thought, well, it'd be kind of interesting to see what it led to. So I sort of started up, but the primary driver that I thought was at that time, and even now, I was running a database that we compile, which is about landslides that kill people. And what I thought I would do is try to put a sort of monthly post up, which was about the statistics for that month. And I saw the blog as being kind of the primary way to communicate that part of my science. But actually, I very rarely do that now, because that was sort of the point that you're making. I mean, it sort of was kind of interesting, but it didn't seem to be getting me or anyone else very far, really. So I allowed the blog to evolve, and what happened is that I kind of found a voice, I think. But the voice also, the way that the blog operates influences my research heavily. So there's this very strong interaction between what I'm researching and what I'm blogging about, and vice versa. I don't blog about my own research, but it is about kind of things that are interesting around my research. And I do think that my research direction And some of the best research that I've done since has been very clearly defined by things that have come up as a result of the blog. So I think it can really enhance your research as well as enhancing your reputation. And that kind of open communication is a key part of that.
His blog is a good one. It crosses over too in terms of interest, because you get a lot of interest from the general public. Even though Dave sticks to his kind of scientific analysis of what he's looking at when he writes these things. He's not writing something that would work in Mashable. He's not writing that, but you see references. I mean, his posts are linked to and referred to by a lot of other media outlets and stuff, because he's seen as a. I mean, when something happens, a large landslide or another natural disaster of some kind, as a journalist, you're looking for an authoritative voice somewhere about what's going on, and Dave is one of those people who's providing it. He's there with the information. He's looking at the same thing that you've heard about, and so it's very handy for the media.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good point, because when I am reporting some usually complicated astrophysics topic or something like that, I'm not of a science background. I have a master's in science journalism, but I did not get a degree in a science. So I always am looking for authoritative voices to fill my stories, basically. So, I mean, that's something I think important to remember as a researcher. If you're planning to start a blog, you're going to have people like me coming to your Twitter pages or your blogs and looking at what you're writing about and getting ideas for stories, or maybe even sometimes quoting you. Because when you put that kind of information out there, it's accessible to everybody. And I think that sometimes that's something that people forget, especially scientists who are in some ways used to being kind of in a smaller group. And this, when you blog, you're really bringing it to a large audience. So.
Yeah, I should mention, I also write for Discovery News on the side. I've done that for many years, and I have to always say that I also work for AGU. But I've contacted Dave through emails, and sometimes say, "Can I quote you from your?"
Yeah.
I mean, I could do it anyway, but since I've worked with him, I don't want to offend him, so I'm going to make sure I ask him. But
DM on Twitter.
Yeah. So it's we definitely do it, but he's there. He's there because you see his stuff. It's available, so it's a really big aspect of science blogging, is that you can become an important source for people. Any other questions along those lines out there before we?
Okay, here you go.
One of the things that's emerged in the UK in the last couple of years is a site called The Conversation, where experts write one-off blogs, essentially. So I'm just wondering, where do you think this fits into the blogosphere, and do you see it as a replacement, something that's going to overtake it, or something that complements what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, my previous institution was a subscriber to The Conversation. And so if an institution is a subscriber, and it's not cheap, actually, for the institution, then you basically gain the right to be able to put articles on there. So,
can you describe what this is? I'm not familiar with it.
It is basically a site in which encourages kind of short commentaries, sort of typically 500 to about 1,000 words, and it can be about anything and anything at all. But it's always, or nearly always, a kind of academically informed view of something that's going on. So it might be an opinion piece about the Paris climate discussions, or it might be an opinion piece about the Syria crisis or whatever. And so what happens is it's a mechanism in which typically within universities media officers will run the link to The Conversation, and then they'll get academics to write, often co-write with media people, marketing people, an article that's then posted, and it's picked up quite a lot by the mainstream media, and it does play a different role in terms of providing a much more focused opportunity for the academic community to provide a kind of commentary on specific aspects. So I have written a couple of times for it around issues around earthquakes and such like. I don't think it replaces blogs, But it is a kind of parallel activity, and I mean certainly with the institution I'm in at the moment, where we're not subscribers to it, we've been looking at it quite carefully because of the way that it can raise the profile of the institution. I think it's good, but I think it's different.
Any other questions out there on those lines? One of the, is there one? No? No.
Hey, this is probably more for David, but do you ever worry about blogging about a scientific discovery and undercutting your ability to like get it in, or the scientists to get it in a top journal because you've already broken the news?
Yeah, and I was on one of these panels before in which that turned into a very, very heated discussion. I mean, very heated discussion at EGU, and I came away from it slightly scarred. I think it's probably fair to say, and thanks to a blog post that someone put up afterwards, actually. You know, it's in the earth sciences. And I can't really talk about other areas, but in the earth sciences, some of the major journals have very clear policies that essentially if you've published your work previously, then they won't accept it for publication. Other disciplines have different views, but in the earth sciences, some of the kind of key articles, key journals do have those policies. And so the approach that I have adopted from the very start is that I don't blog about my ongoing research. I blog about things which are kind of related to my research, and I sometimes blog about something in which I don't intend to publish in due course. But I don't ever blog, or I don't even really write about the stuff that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. What I do though is when I have an article published, I do then write about it. So when it's out there, I'll write a kind of commentary on it and refer back to it, put a quotation in, maybe try and explain the context of why we did that bit of work and what I think are the kind of key. I mean, it's almost like an extended abstract in a more friendly form. And I have noticed that then does drive the citation rate on the paper. So writing that commentary is really helpful in terms of getting it out there.
That's why you do that. I was wondering why you do that.
That's why I do it. So that's the policy that I've adopted. Others take a very different view, and I think you need to decide as an individual blogger where you sit on that one. I do have a slight concern about, it seems to me that if you look at climate science, a discipline that's been under such attack, one of the things that's protected has been the integrity of peer review. And I do think as a scientific community we should try and protect the integrity of peer review in whatever form it works. And I've always just had a slight sneaking worry that if you pre-publish your research before it's gone through peer review, maybe that's kind of undermining the integrity of the peer review process, and I think that'll harm science in the long term. But others have a very different view, and all I'm explaining is my view. I'm not trying to say that should be yours.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd like to dive into a difficult topic, which I know Miriam has. I don't know if Dave has to deal with it as much. Maybe in your job more than in your blog, but that is how to deal with negative comments, attacks, things that happen a lot. Something I can speak to as well, but I know Mashable must get a lot more than AGU does on some of these things. You had any recent experiences you want to relate to on that?
Yeah, we get a lot of hate. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of a good example. I guess the one of the more recent examples that I can remember is that NASA had posted a photo taken from the International Space Station and said that it was of the sun and the Earth. And I had seen it. It was posted like maybe 5 hours before I had actually noticed it, and it was a picture of the moon. It was the moon. There was like no way it wasn't the moon. And it was a picture from the station, so it looked like a big star in the sky, but it was the moon. And so I immediately tweeted at NASA, and there was a long list of people who had also done it and said, like, hey, guys, this is not the sun. It's an honest mistake, but it was also up there for, I think, close to 24 hours before it was actually corrected. So I had written a story about it, sort of like moonsplaining, being like, this is the moon, and talked to an expert and wrote a whole thing, and I was like, it's no big deal, but it's the moon and it's not corrected yet. Because Mashable covers social media, so it was within the bounds of what we cover. I got more hate for that story than I have ever gotten for anything in my life. Like, people were emailing me weeks later being like, what are you talking about? You're not a scientist. You don't know what you're talking about. And like yelling at me on the internet about this story, which I thought was kind of a little thing. And I feel like this happens. And in some ways, I don't have data to prove this, but I think that women on the internet in particular get a lot of hate and get a lot of really mean-spirited comments, especially when they're writing about something that is, by and large, a male-dominated field. This is very cathartic for me. So, yeah, I think that is definitely true, and it proved true for this particular story that I had written. And at the end of the day, I decided to, in this particular case, instead of like shaming people for being mean to me, I basically just replied to emails, sent them like the NASA correction, and I was like, thanks for reading. And that was it, like with a smiley face. Yeah, I mean, and I can't say that I'm always like that calm about it. Like I've been known to like retweet people that are trying to correct me and are wrong and be kind of nasty. But the truth of the matter is I just don't think that people should be able to get away with it all the time. So it's up to sort of you as a person on the internet to decide what you do with those negative comments. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes you get things wrong and it should be corrected. But it's also sometimes not that. It's just people being mean.
That's kind of funny because they say you're not. It's almost like the opposite of what they do with climate scientists. You know, they say you don't know anything, you're not a scientist, and yet they tell the climate scientists you don't know anything, but you're a scientist.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
It's strange.
It's bizarre. Yeah, the whole thing's weird. I know we've in the AGU blogosphere we've had we don't get a lot of negative comments on the blogs usually, but we'll get our Facebook page will get things that aren't necessarily related to our blogs, just things that we share, and we try not to hide or block things unless they're abusive, and really crossing the line, calling names and stuff like that, which isn't usually the case. But I did have one interesting experience we had in the last year where we had one post. It was a shared article. I think it was about Patagonian glaciers. It wasn't ours. It was, I don't even remember. I think it might have been the New York Times or something like that. I don't recall. And it was, for reasons I won't explain, accidentally promoted, paid for. So it was sent out to, boosted. They say boost your post. It wasn't meant to be, but it happened. But it ended up being a very interesting experiment because what happened is that post got a ton of comments. It went out to people who otherwise wouldn't have looked at it. I don't know how it works. Again, Facebook is a black box the way they do things. And when you boost a post, it goes out and suddenly it appears in places you don't know. We got a huge amount of traffic on it. It just exploded. And again, it wasn't even our materials. It's a shared thing. But the comments, because it had to do with climate change and those glaciers, boy, the trollish, horrible stuff that got in those comments. And here's the next thing that was interesting, is I suddenly, for the first time in our entire history of being on Facebook, I saw a drop in our likes. And I was wondering, now what's going on? And as far as I can tell, what was happening was that all that interaction, all the engagement on that post caused it to rise to the top of people's news feeds and stay at the top or close to the top. And some people were sick of seeing it because it was so negative, and so they started unliking us. And that was a lesson that, wow, sometimes a lot of engagement can hurt you in terms of your reaching your audience. It can actually hurt you when people start not paying attention to you because they don't want to see all that negativity. So in that case, I actually had to go through and get rid of the most negative comments and hide them so it wouldn't rise to the top anymore, So it was an interesting lesson, and I think I'm interpreting it right, but I really don't know. I'm just trying to piece together what you see in the Facebook insights and stuff like that. Yeah.
I mean, on a sort of related issue, I've had 2 occasions in which I've had utterly furious responses from other academics to what I've written, that is something that you risk as a scientist who's blogging, and in both cases the context has been. One of the things that I do on my blog is when there is a major landslide, I often try to provide a kind of instant interpretation of what might lie behind it, based upon kind of piecing together different pieces of information from satellite imagery and accounts, and if there's a video and photographs, etc., and just try to give a context as what sort of landslide is this, and what might have happened, and what have been the causes, and on both occasions. In doing so, there's been a kind of interpretation from the individual concerned that in some way I'm providing a direct criticism of people who are involved in it, and to a certain degree, and in one case to a strong degree, that was the case. I was saying, when you piece together this information based upon what's happened at this site before, actually this was foreseeable, and the upshot has been. On both occasions, absolutely furious. Really.
Well, we should mention that these are cases where there are deaths. And then some of the researchers on the other end who are closer, there's a lot of emotions involved.
There are. And so one of the things that I've had to do is to think through how do you respond when you get an email which is just absolutely livid with what you've written, and bearing in mind that level of anger might then drive a complaint to the institution about the fact that you've put this material up. So my approach to this is to play it with an absolutely straight bat, which is to reply to them and say, look, thank you very much for your email. I don't really understand exactly where your problem lies, but let's have a conversation about it. And if there is something wrong in the post that I've written, I will of course correct it. And actually, generally speaking, I think that should diffuse the situation. Interestingly, on neither occasion has it. In which case, my approach is just to stick with that line, which is no matter what comes back, is to say, look, let's just have a discussion about this. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. And if it is inappropriate, then I will change the post, but I'm not going to do that until you've explained to me where the issues lie. So I do think that you need to think about where, if you're going to blog about science, you need to be ready for the fact that in some way you may upset someone who doesn't agree with your scientific perspective, and just to think through how you would respond in that situation. And if you do need to respond, I would recommend you don't get pulled into the argument about it, but just try to understand where that person is coming from.
That's better than my way. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, the temptation to tweet.
Yeah, I'm mostly being heckled by like 15-year-olds. So
yeah,
it's a little less.
It's a different situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I have on a couple of occasions sort of written about climate change and landslides. And boy, do you get a response to that stuff. And there are some extraordinary people out there. How people who blog regularly on the controversy around climate science deal with that stuff. I hold them in utter respect, really, because there are some very difficult people.
When I blogged for Discovery News years ago, and was a producer for them, and I had to handle a lot of comments. And the climate was the big one. You got so many negative comments and people attacking. And I tried everything. I tried ignoring it, and I tried humor. I was trying to take the Mark Twain approach. Humor is the best defense sometimes. And nothing worked. It's just the best. In the end, it was just sometimes you just can't feed it. You just have to be polite or not say anything if it's not a constructive comment. I mean, sometimes there are constructive comments or people who they just don't really understand something, and referring them to materials is what I do most of the time if I can. But there are some, like there's an individual who is a regular Twitter character out there who. There's a few, but there's one in particular who I'm not going to name or anything, but I think it's a he, goes after climate scientists at this meeting. He's not here, but he'll try and entice them into Twitter conversations, and he baits them into these things, and they don't necessarily know who he is, and so once they start to interact, then the game starts. And I have to actually intervene when I see this happen and send a message to the scientists saying, don't engage with this person because they're just going to tie you in knots and get you all upset. And it's just a horrible little game that the guy plays all the time. Been doing it for years. But there's some people out there you just have to be aware of and to stay away, because there are individuals who that's their game. That's what they do. That's all they do is this kind of thing. And one alternative, I don't recommend it, is you can create a fake identity online and try and attack them with that. But then you're just going to play, they're just playing their game. You don't want to do that either. Some people do that. I don't really find that very effective. I've actually tried that, but I found that even on a fake identity, I couldn't get that rude. I just couldn't find it in myself to be that rude. I just couldn't do it. So it wasn't any good. I just don't have it in me to be that awful, I guess. I'm glad to find out. So. Does anybody else have any experiences like that they want to talk about in terms of dealing with negative stuff online? Any insights?
For institutional purposes, this is a blog or Facebook pages. My strategy is a couple things. As you said, I'll try to engage them on a very professional, if not technical level at the first. I give them about 2 tries. If they don't get polite, then I just stop replying. And if they keep commenting, like more than 5 times, then maybe they just disappear. The comments disappear. And then if it's something that I get a number of negative comments and it's a trend, I will actually create a post to rebut those and use that. As somebody else said, point to that in the future. Have that as a web page that you can say, this explains our position. This is our, and they'll come back and you say, okay, here's the page. That's our answer.
I do vlogging, so I'm in front of the camera. So when I get a lot of criticism, sometimes it will be based on my physical appearance. My favorite one of which was just I mean, I'm a guy, I can only imagine how bad it must be for female vloggers. My favorite one of which was somebody who just said, you're getting chubby, time to go back to the gym, cheers.
Oh, God.
They thank me for my future actions. But in all these cases, I actually find that it's best to, in a way, kill it with kindness. Mm-hmm. Like with that post, I actually replied saying, oh, actually, I've been losing weight this year. This is my gym schedule. This is what I do. What's your gym schedule like? And then they don't reply. But then, just genuine. And then equally, because I do climate science as part of my videos, if you engage with people and you back yourself up with credible sources and then invite them to say, well, what's your source for that statistic? And just actually engage with them. Either they will slip up and you can actually educate them, or they will refuse to reply. So I find being civil and killing with kindness is the best approach.
Actually, I recognize you now. I've looked at your stuff just the other day. So now I got you. Okay. now it's starting to fit now. Okay. All right. Any other comments on that matter? We have one up here.
Oh. Sure.
So I have a very specific question. So I'm in charge of the social media for an NSF supported coordinating office, and we try to avoid the political stuff as much as possible because we don't want to get in trouble. But Our coordinating office has to do with Earth surface processes. So like paleoclimate is a big part of that. And so I'm wondering, do you have any advice on how to approach complex, emotion-laden topics like that without sort of starting that negative comment reel?
I can tell you what I do just to the AGU, point of view. When we have like comments on Facebook, one of the most effective things really is if we have a policy statement, I'll just refer to it. I'll just say this is, if you're looking at your stuff, you have to assume that they're going to. You're looking at whatever your group is, or at AGU. It's AGU. AGU has a position on a lot of things, and they're stated, and there's somewhere we can just point to it and say, "This is the statement." You can argue all you want. I don't say that part, but you can say anything they want. But the fact is, this is the organization's position, and that's all there is to it. That's one thing I do when it gets to that point. I don't know if that's would work in your case.
I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I'll give you an example which actually sits in the other part of my portfolio, so isn't earth science related. So in my institution, we have a group of political scientists who are specialists in the electoral processes and in polling. And they were running a blog site before the British general election in May, in which they were aggregating the opinion polls. All the opinion polls that were being run, they were aggregating that information and using that to predict the outcome of the election. And this was being picked up by the mainstream media very extensively, because it was effectively a kind of academically led definitive view of the way that polling was going in the UK. And as you may be aware, the kind of oddity about the British general election was that the opinion polls turned out to be completely wrong. And in fact, all of the opinion polls, and therefore the aggregate work that was being done at UEA, was predicting that no major party would have a majority. And actually, when the exit polls came out at 1 minute past 10 p.m., because in the UK, when the polls close at 10 and the exit polls can be published at that point, they clearly indicated that there would be a Conservative majority government, and that was the way it panned out. So what we ended up with was something which, over a sort of 4-month period at UEA, consistently wrongly predicted the outcome of the election, and that's driven a kind of little bit of heartache within the institution about to what degree would we want to do that again. And the conclusion we came to is that we would and we will continue to be involved in this activity, even though it's very controversial. And that's because at the end of the day, where the problem lay was actually the way that the opinion polls were being led and being organised. And in fact, the problem is that what people tell opinion pollsters and what they actually do when they walk into an electoral booth and put a cross on a piece of paper. There's no hanging chads in the UK British electoral system. That actually they do two different things. But nonetheless, that is the best. Our view is that is the best kind of academically led interpretation of the information that we can get. And the caveat is, it's only as good as the information that's coming to us. So, it is dangerous to get involved in these things that are potentially controversial, and you need to do it, I think, as an institution, as an individual, eyes wide open. But I think it's very sad if we shy away from being involved in controversial issues. I think we should caveat what we're saying, but nonetheless, I think if we're going to fulfil our role in society, which is about trying to make sure that society develops, in an appropriate manner, sustainable manner, whatever, that we should be willing to get involved in this, even though occasionally we'll get our fingers burned.
We have even another kind of way that we just sort of incidentally do it with AGU blogs, is you'll see up here on the screen, here's one of our more opinionated bloggers, Dan Satterfield.
Yeah.
He likes to dive into stuff. He's a TV meteorologist, and he'll get into climate change a lot, and he'll state an opinion. Now, it is AGU, right? AGU blogosphere, but it's not. It's his blog. And we have this little thing you see. I can get this pointer here. Right? over here. The ideas and opinions expressed on this site are those of the authors and commenters alone. They do not necessarily represent the views of American Geophysical Union. We actually added that. It was already there, but we made it more prominent and beefed it up about a year or so back, because people were, and they still do it, they still mistake what the bloggers write for being AGU positions, and they're not. They're just part of the blogosphere. The fact is, only if there's a typo do I ever usually touch anything these guys blog. It's their blogs. They put this stuff up. I just interact with them in terms of more management level stuff. So it's sort of like this guy's state a position, and it's on our blogosphere. It's not the official position. So it's almost another way to kind of get it in. You know what I'm saying? Without it being the official position. So that might be another little subterfuge in a way, but Dan's one that's particularly opinionated in things. And the whole flip side, which in Mashable, of course, is in the news business, controversy is good. You want controversy because that gets you traffic. And Dan's posts can, really, I have other bloggers who are not very controversial, but occasionally they will be. Like Callan Bentley, the Mountain Beltway blogger. He's, pretty much a geologist and talks about geology, but every now and then he'll get a very opinionated piece in there, and I'm always like, ooh, let's see what happens. And I'm split, because on one side I don't want, because it's kind of hard for AGU sometimes to be, to have this guy stating an opinion that may not be the official or even close to the official position of AGU. On the other hand, I'm like, oh boy, look at the traffic go up. So it's a mixed thing,
Yeah.
So just on that point, we also have a similar comment on our blogs, on the GU blogs, but in addition, if we have a guest blog post on our blog, on our main blog, that we think might be particularly controversial, we'll actually add it as a byline right at the end of the blog, so that it's really clear. So we did that just this week. We published a blog about how much should scientists publish, and it was the opinion of someone else, and so we wanted to make that very clear, so we just had a little byline at the bottom highlighting that it wasn't the opinion of the EGU but rather that of the blogger.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you can never really overstate it, and even then people will ignore it, but all you could do is have it in there. So yeah.
I would also say if there are news articles or things that you like that are being talked about in the media and written about, even if it's not an opinion piece that somebody has written about it, just a straight ahead news story, that's the kind of thing that you can post and still have some variety of, this isn't ours, but this is something we're sharing, like the social part of social media. So
yeah, it's sort of arm's length kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like, here's a thing that's being discussed.
Right. Yeah. It'd be slightly safer. You never know. None of this might work in the end, but it's worth a try. You still get in trouble with your higher ups. You never know. Any other questions about that?
I just wanted to comment. I hope we're encouraging you to get out there and do this and not.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to be all negative.
It's fun to tell the scary. Yeah, I told a scary story, but the more of you that get out there and write about your science, the more we have scientists that look like regular people, and the more you have diversity of scientists and things like that. But please do get in there and don't be afraid of the controversy. And you should ask Larry if you need help if someone's really beating up on you, because there is a support community for scientists who are, the climate scientists have this, that reach out and this is happening type thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. No, I'll also say I love interviewing scientists that keep blogs and engage that way, just because it's so nice to be able to talk to somebody who kind of understands, oh, okay, so you're looking for sort of you can explain it to me like a 5-year-old. If you're speaking to a 5-year-old, you could explain your research to me that way, which is super helpful. So just being able to sort of speak like a human is amazing for a journalist or whoever is talking to you about your work.
Yeah, most bloggers don't have all this negative problem. It's not. But when it happens, it can be really devastating. Because you're not used to it. But it's not the most. In fact, I've had this session past years, and I actually had people say, "How do I get more comments?" It's like, I can tell you how to get more comments, but you may not like the comments, but you can. It's real easy to get comments if you really want that. So thanks, Aries, for pointing that out. Though it is, you're right.
Yeah, and I would just comment, I think, on that, and I don't want to give a negative impression of blogging at all. I think that the blog has played a really, really kind of key part of the development of my career. I think, if you take the simple metrics about kind of citation rate of my papers and that sort of thing, you can actually do a graph of the citation rate of my papers with time, and the graph really steepens at the point where I started blogging. It's quite interesting. But also in terms of creating research opportunities. I have a paper which is under review at the moment in Nature Geoscience, and that came about because one day I wrote a blog article about kind of interesting small riverbank failure that I'd seen. And as a result of that blog post, I was asked to sit on a government panel for the government of South Australia, and that then led to a research grant, and that research grant has now led to a Nature Geoscience paper. And if I hadn't written that blog post, none of that would have ever have happened. And I'm also pretty certain that I've had a number of invitations to go and talk at meetings, because sometimes I'll when I get an invitation to go and talk at a meeting, I'll blog about the fact that I've got this invitation, and hey, there's this great meeting happening, and so people know that that one of the ways that they can raise the profile of their meeting is by kind of asking me to go along. So there's all sorts of ways, I think, that it benefits you. Plus, basically every student in the world who studies landslides knows my blog. So if I go to a meeting or whatever, there's always kind of PhD students who know who I am. I don't know who they are, but they know who I am. And even I do talks at for school kids, and teachers use it. So I did one in London recently. There was 1,700 16-year-olds there. And when I stood there were 7 people talking. When I stood to talk, they cheered. It was quite the most bizarre. As an academic, you're just not used to this. So actually, the overall way that this has contributed to my academic career is really important. And sometimes I just stop and think, well, crikey, if I write a paper and it gets 10 citations in a year, I think that paper's doing pretty well. My blog regularly gets 1,000 individual readers per day. That is a kind of different reach, and to me, it's that 1,000 individual readers a day makes it really worthwhile. So do it, because it's fantastic. Blogging is fantastic.
Larry,
Okay.
we have
Yeah. Another blogger, AGU blogger right here.
So I'm Jessica Ball. I write Magma Cum Laude. You've probably seen it pop up on there. I want to throw in another advocating comment for blogging. I can say that blogging has actually had a direct impact on my career. When I finished grad school, I started a position with Geological Society of America as their science policy fellow, and I had the people who were in charge of reviewing my application to that say, you got this job because you wrote a blog. You are a science communicator, and that is an amazing skill to have in your toolkit for any scientist, really. And I've been blogging since, I think, 2008. It's quite a while now, and it's opened up a lot of opportunities, and it's been really just instrumental in adding to my CV, adding to my skill set. And I haven't had quite as many direct applications to my research as maybe Dave has, but it's still, even if it doesn't do that, it's a really great thing to do. And I would definitely encourage everybody to try it if you're not already doing it.
I would even say our blogosphere is a good place to kind of look at a variety of science bloggers, because they all do it a little differently. Dave's is entirely different than Jessica's in terms of what kinds of things that their focuses are very different, and we have several others. So it's a good place to get maybe some ideas, and there are plenty of others out there. And I think each one. Let me look here. Most of you guys have some blog rolls. You have tweets. Let's see. You don't have to have a blog roll there, but some of them have blog rolls to yet other bloggers out there. So study up what's out there. Find something that fits that fits what you want to do, and you can what they say about imitation is the highest form of flattery or something. Go ahead and use someone else's approach in your area. You may be surprised. It might be a really good way to go about it. We have time for one more. It looks like there's someone
back.
Hi, Kristen Eulenbrock. This is a very specific question, but does anyone have experience or thoughts on the outlet Medium, which is this kind of hybrid blogging social media tool? It gets lots of interesting traffic. Any experience posting on it, good, bad? Any thoughts on that?
It came up in the last session as well. I personally haven't got experience with it. And you guys, did you?
I don't have experience with it, but I found sources through it. So I don't know what their algorithm is, but it's something that's very well trafficked by journalists and other folks. I have never posted on it, so I can't say much more than that. But it seems good.
Does anybody else in the
Yeah.
room have any insight into that? I know I got to look into it now because it's been raised enough. I need to learn about it myself.
Thank you. One thing about Medium that I've found when I looked into it, and again, because it came up in the last session, one thing to be aware of is I know with Medium in the past, intellectual property and who the owner of the post or the information actually is has sometimes been in question. Now that goes back and forth kind of depending on what version is out, but one rule of thumb might be sometimes that you have your own blog and then you repost to your Medium account and then you just have a disclaimer that says, this material originally appeared on my blog at this date, when in doubt.
That makes sense.
Thanks. Yeah, it's okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, we're up against the hour here. I wish we could have just ended on that great comment Dave made about. Yes, that was a perfect ending. But I'd like to thank these guys for coming here, and thank you all for attending. And please send comments to us if you have any suggestions or things you'd like us to do the next time we have one of these next year, because it's always evolving. So thanks very much, everyone.
And for those of you who were here earlier, sorry, you're going to hear the same exact thing again, but quick plug for the Sharing Science program at AGU. My name's Shane Hanlon. I'm in Sharing Science. What we do is provide scientists the tools to get their science out there to everyone basically but scientists, so in a plain spoken manner. And so blogging is a huge part of that. We want to thank them for being here. We have some materials in the back. Please look us up, and thank you for coming.
I hope it wasn't like too really bad.
No, but you really raised the real issue. It was like something we have to